All right, don't feed the trolls, but here I am doing it due to my lack of free will, lack of personal responsibility. But yeah, you might say, I'm not a troll, man. I'm not a troll. I think if you're not engaging in a dialogue where you're really attempting to sort of, you're not really trying to hear the other person, you're just trying to kind of repeatedly maybe take little digs or whatever. If you're not actually trying to understand the other person's position, then you might as well be labeled a troll. But I'm gonna go ahead and make this video anyway. Just maybe it clarifies, just for my own sake, to clarify my position in the last video. And first I'll say, of course, these aren't video. I'm not a YouTuber with a production crew, and these are mostly on the fly videos. The last one I did type up something, but even that, it wasn't something that I spent hours on. It's my just on the top of my head opinions on things. But that being said, I stand by what I said. Of course, I could have done a better job of being clear about what the point is in connecting the dots. I think in some ways I'm giving the listener too much credit, thinking that they can kind of connect the dots. And clearly some people can and some people can't. So let's connect the dots a little bit better here, hopefully. First we'll start with actually maybe we'll leave the racial stuff and the wokeness of Sapolsky till I make the first point, which I think is actually the main point, right? The main point of the video, the main point that I try to get across when I criticize both Sam Harris and Robert Sapolsky on their sort of moral proclamations about what we ought to do, how we ought to think and feel, as a result of this sort of epiphany, this realization of following the science to realize we have no free will. So Sapolsky in particular, right, is who I'm responding to, but Sam Harris is same deal basically. But Sapolsky claims that no one really has any moral responsibility whatsoever, right? Meritocracy is a joke, more or less, right? And before, it's like, I even feel the need, oh no, you can't, did he really say meritocracy is a joke? Are we not allowed to summarize someone's, is it a straw man if the person lays out clearly how they think meritocracy is not a legitimate thing, but they didn't say it's a joke? Find me the quote, bro. Find me the quote in 400 pages. Show your receipts, bro. Yeah, that's just a side note. That's not a sort of like that sort of gotcha thing. Like, oh, where's your receipts? Yes, I'm not gonna go through 400 pages for a douche nozzle in the comment section to find receipts for everything. Okay. I'm sorry, you got me there. That doesn't mean that the overall points that I'm making don't exist because I'm not willing to go through 400 pages and find every little thing. And with that being an example, right? Meritocracy is a joke. You could use that as a thing, like, he didn't actually say that, right? He didn't say those words, right? I'm summarizing or going through the implications of someone's position on things. Whatever, you want to disagree. At some point, might as well not even have a conversation though, because yeah, it's just kind of nitpicking. But so anyway, no moral responsibility, okay, at all. Then from that, you're deriving this idea that you ought to have empathy. You ought to see certain things like the absurdity of meritocracy, of wanting punishment, retribution, revenge. These are all sort of absurd notions, right? It's actually immoral to have these things, right? This is where the position becomes absurd, right? So the serial killer, right? Now they're a product of genetics and environment. We should have a better understanding of them, stop having these feelings of anger, revenge. But at the same time, you, someone who also let's just say this conservative person out there who's big into revenge in the criminal justice system, which, mind you, I do disagree with that, right? I've made that clear, but that goes over your head, irrelevant, right? But let's just say this conservative who is big into revenge and the death penalty and all these things, also just a product of their genetics and environment, no moral responsibility. They had no say in becoming that conservative, right? Okay? So the point is that there is no control for the criminal or the conservative, right? They always were going to be the way they are based on their conditioning, their genetics, environment, their ancestors, whatever, all that stuff, right? So what's my point here? It's absurd to try to take away the moral culpability, the moral responsibility of a serial killer or whatever, someone along those lines. But at the same time to say, well, you're immoral if you have this idea about how you want to handle this person, right? Thus the point of my comment, empathy for the serial killer, not the conservative. Now you can nitpick and say he never outright said don't have empathy for conservatives. He's not saying to do horrible things to conservatives. Here's an example of where he defended a sort of a far-right extremist, and that's all fine and well and good, but you're either purposefully ignoring the point here, or actually, I don't know what. So that's the point. The point is clear. When it comes to sort of conservative politics, when it comes to how conservatives view morality, there's a certain condemnation or calling that sort of approach of things immoral. Now, the reason why I would bring up things like the random invoking of race, talking about dead white man or even just a white man, it happened several times. I know you say provide receipts, and because I don't have them all on, I guess I could take the time to look through the book for you, but I'm not going to. I tried to give you some of them based on what someone else told me. I didn't even check them. I don't know. You want to call me a liar that he doesn't talk about, he doesn't call people dead white men or white men in situations where it has nothing he's talking about has a direct connection to race. All right, then you can say that I'm making it up. We'll leave it there. I'm not, but that's what you want to say. That's fine. But he does. And the reason why that's relevant is it is just an indication of his political ideology, of this sort of cringy wokeness. And it's relevant beyond just the cringe factor, right? It's just a side note. And what it's pointing to is that regardless of someone's idea that everything's determined, and therefore you would theoretically, right, if you had a sort of way to sort of, if you're trying to think that everything's determined, you have no free will, right? But then you're supposed to be able to somehow through that lens look at things in some sort of clear, rational way. If you could do that, right, then you wouldn't have this sort of ideology. You would understand that everyone is a product of their environment. You wouldn't have this sort of weird hang up about white people, white men. Your examples of bad behavior wouldn't generally go in the direction of bringing up Donald Trump, bringing up conservative policies in the criminal justice system, bringing up other, white men who have stupid ideas, and he does that. See, that's what I'm remembering even now. It goes beyond even calling out people for their whiteness when it has no relevance. White men tend to do this thing, right? So his examples of sort of negative behavior go all in one direction as well. And so back to the point at hand, why this is all relevant is it shows a lot of things. One thing is that there isn't an ability to sort of be objective. Especially if we follow the actual, the track of determinism and no free will, and you do actually, in fact, someone was saying, oh, well, just because determinism exists doesn't mean that you're a robot. Actually, it does. Even Sapolsky himself, I don't know if he uses the word robot, but he sort of acknowledges where this could go in a nihilistic direction, right? Now he finds some way maybe to sort of kind of veer off from that direction, but he admits himself how it can lead to sort of depression, learned helplessness, all these other things. Now, so the issue though is that you're not able to be a sort of rational, robot or determine if you are versus anybody else, right? The reason why you think that you're rational is because that's how you were conditioned to be. Everyone has the conditioning that they think they're right about something. Now, maybe they think they're right until they're proven wrong, but even the fact if they think that they're proven wrong, right? Just like someone is determined to believe in free will. Someone is determined to believe in determinism, right? Everything in the end becomes a bit circular. But the thing about it that becomes the most absurd is thinking you can talk about how no one has free will. Everyone essentially is just a product of the inputs of their biology and environment, all that stuff. And then at the same time, having confidence about your moral proclamations. Now, it does sort of change things if you just say, yeah, free will's pretty limited. We should have more empathy because, look, some people have rough childhoods and it leads to this. That tends to be a more effective argument, and it doesn't lead to as much absurdity and contradictions. It's just saying, yeah, come on. And so that's why he does, and he knows that on some level, which is why at various points he does try to hedge a little and not say that there might be free will so much, but say, hey, my main point here is just to let you know we don't have as much free will as you thought. Maybe you don't have to agree with me, but whatever. And the problem with that is though it's too late, because the whole book really is about how we have no free will. That's his goal. He reiterates that over and over again. And so to then sort of try to hedge and be like, well, I really just want to convince you that free will is limited, not that it doesn't exist at all. It's a little bit too late, because if you really trust him and buy into his arguments, right, if you find it to be compelling, the actual logical conclusion would be it would lead to a bit of nihilism, and at least moral nihilism, in the sense of realizing that everybody, no matter what they do, was always going to end up in that place, right? Due to no fault of their own. And yes, before someone says it, change can happen, right? But that still doesn't change anything. Change happens with the clouds, right? Change happens with the clouds. We don't, like he talks about, you don't blame the cloud for raining, right? So, to sum this all up, you can't say that there's no such thing as moral responsibility and then clearly imply that there's moral and immoral behavior, that there's right and wrong ways to handle things when there's no ability to control any of that, that we are essentially the same thing, more or less, right? Obviously there's differences between us and clouds, but not really in terms of actual moral accountability. There's no difference between us and a cloud or a hurricane and so on, according to Sapolsky, right? So if that's being the case, there should be no sort of, the rational thing, if you could control it, would be no animosity towards anyone. You're just watching it all play out, right? Just like you probably wouldn't have animosity towards the cloud. Now, the problem with this is not how reality plays out. Now, unless maybe you're a very skilled sort of monk or Buddhist and you've sort of gotten close to acquiring this level of inner peace and lack of judgment, and I think that's great. Clearly, anyone angry in the comment section, right? How would they, sort of picking at me and not really trying to understand where I'm coming from, just trying to do little gotcha moments. Oh, you said you skimmed through some of the studies that you already agree with, right? I guess I should address that too, right? I shouldn't have made that comment in the video because it just opened the door for people to kind of trivialize what I said and go in different directions. But here's why that actually had no relevance. I skimmed studies that I already was willing to grant him the premise or the sort of the conclusion of the study, which is the lack of free will. The point that I was criticizing, which I've said over and over to this douche nozzle in the comments section, is the philosophical implications of not having free will. So the fact that I skipped certain parts that I already am granting him the point on has no relevance. And instead of to repeat this sort of, well, how can you know what you're talking about? Da, da, da. Yeah. The studies that I didn't, the ones that I sort of glossed over here and there were ones to prove that free will doesn't exist. That for the sake of the last video and for the sake of what I actually believe, more or less I get it. I get it. Here are the studies that show free will doesn't exist. Sure, we can argue that for another video, but I wasn't arguing that. Therefore, the fact that I skimmed over a part that I'm not actually addressing actually doesn't have as much relevance as you might think. What has relevance is the philosophical implication. Can you try to hold people morally accountable while saying that no one is morally accountable for anything? And no, that's absolutely absurd. If you can't connect the dots there, I don't know what to tell you.